Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're starting something I think is going to be, well, pretty fascinating. A real close look at some foundational yoga texts. And we're kicking things off with a really key one, the Hatha Yoga Pradipika.
Absolutely, a cornerstone text.
Yeah, and think of this as the first step, really. We want to do a bigger exploration to properly understand the origins and, the impact of so much of what we call yoga today.
Exactly. It's not just about looking at an old text. We're diving in to see where it came from, why it was written, and crucially, why this 15th century guide still matters so much. This first dive is really about establishing its importance.
Okay, so the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. Many people might have heard the name, but let's really get to grips with what it actually is.
Right. So in essence, it's a Sanskrit text from the 15th century.
Yeah.
The author was Swami Svatmarama.
Svatmarama, okay.
And you can think of it as a practical guide, really, to Hatha Yoga. The title itself, it translates to Light on Hatha Yoga.
Light on Hatha Yoga. That's quite illuminating, isn't it? Sets out its purpose, clearly.
It really does. It suggests its aim is to, shed light on how to balance the body's energies, the mind's energies.
So it's one of the earliest manuals we have.
One of the oldest surviving comprehensive manuals, yes. It systematically lays out Hatha Yoga practices, things like postures, asanas, breathing techniques, pranayama, and meditation practices too, all geared towards physical health, yes, but ultimately towards spiritual growth.
And for anyone interested in yoga's roots, this text seems, essential.
Oh, absolutely fundamental. Its influence on how yoga developed and all the different styles we see today, it's just immense.
So like when you go to a modern yoga class.
Exactly. If you're in a Hatha class or even a Vinyasa class, many of the practices, their lineage traces right back, in large part, to the teachings in this Pradipika.
Interesting.
Though it's worth mentioning, while the core stuff, postures, breathing is still very relevant, some of the more, let's say, intense cleansing techniques described,
Right.
People approach those much more cautiously today. We have different understandings of health and safety now.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. So it's this historical pillar, but still relevant. Let's go back then. 15th century, you said. Medieval India.
That's right. 15th century medieval India. It was a really dynamic time for yoga, lots of different traditions evolving.
And the author, Swami Svatmarama.
He's believed to have been part of the Nath yogi lineage.
The Nath lineage. What were they known for?
They were particularly known for integrating rigorous physical practices with tantric philosophy.
Tantra. We hear that word a lot. How did that influence this text specifically?
Well, we can dig into the philosophy more later, but the key thing here is that the Nath tradition saw the physical body as crucial, as an indispensable tool for spiritual realization.
Okay.
So the Pradipika, it functions as a kind of compilation. It pulls together earlier Hatha Yoga teachings, aiming to make these sometimes quite hidden practices more, accessible.
So Svatmarama didn't just invent all this.
Oh, definitely not. It's considered one of the three most important classical texts on Hatha Yoga. You've got the Pradipika, the Karana Samhita, and the Shiva Samhita.
Right, the big three.
Exactly. And actually, recent research suggests there might be at least 8 earlier texts that fed into the Pradipika.
Wow, 8!
Yeah. So it really highlights its role as a synthesizer. It brought together different streams of yogic knowledge that existed at the time. Landmark synthesis, you could say.
A landmark synthesis. I like that. And the context, then, these ascetic and tantric influences. How did that shape the text's overall view?
Well, the thinking at the time really framed Hatha Yoga, as presented in Pradipika, as a kind of preparation, a vital first step for the higher meditation practices, often called Raja Yoga.
Preparation? How so?
The idea was that you needed to purify and strengthen the body first through Hatha practices, that this was necessary groundwork before you could really succeed in the deeper levels of meditation.
Okay, got it. So the history shows it's a practical compilation, rooted in tradition, designed to prepare the body for, higher things. Let's get into the text itself then. You said 4 chapters.
Yes, 4 chapters, a total of 389 verses or shlokas, and each chapter builds on the last, addressing a specific aspect of Hatha Yoga.
Right, a systematic progression. Chapter 1 is asanas, the postures.
Precisely. The first chapter, 67 verses, focuses on physical postures. But importantly, these asanas aren't just about, becoming flexible. They're specifically designed to build strength, stability, and really to prepare the body to sit comfortably for long periods in meditation. That's a key aim here.
And it highlights 15 key postures. That feels quite selective.
It is, compared to the huge number we often see listed today. It suggests a focus on those considered most essential for the text's goals.
Can you give some examples?
Sure, you have Padmasana, the lotus pose, famous for meditative stability. Then, something like my war asana, the peacock pose, which is quite a demanding arm balance, shows the emphasis on discipline. And Siddhasana, the accomplished pose, another key seated posture for meditation.
And it's not just the poses themselves in this chapter?
No, definitely not. It also stresses lifestyle factors. Things like eating moderately, keeping your practice space clean and suitable. It emphasizes this holistic view. The postures are part of a bigger picture.
Moderate eating. That's advice you still hear everywhere. Anything else on lifestyle?
Yeah, it specifically advises against things like overeating or even talking too much.
Really? Talking too much?
Yes, the idea being that these things dissipate your energy, your prana, and hinder your progress. So it's about conserving energy and maintaining focus, both inside and out.
Okay, makes sense. So chapter 1 lays the physical foundation. What's next in chapter 2?
Chapter 2 moves into pranayama, the breathing techniques.
Right, breath control.
Exactly. This section has 78 verses, and it outlines 8 main breathing techniques. And the text presents these not just as physical exercises for the lungs, but as powerful ways to work with the body's vital energy.
8 techniques. Are these familiar ones, like the alternate nostril breathing?
Yes, absolutely. Nadi Shuddhana, alternate nostril breathing, is detailed there. Its purpose being to purify the nadis, the energy channels.
Okay.
Another example is Katalapi, often called skull-shining breath, which is more vigorous, known for cleansing and energizing.
And the goal of these, beyond just breathing better?
The main goal, according to the Pradipika, is purifying those subtle energy channels, the nadis, and balancing the life force, the prana, that flows through them. This is seen as absolutely critical preparation for higher states of consciousness.
So it's really about energy management.
Very much so. The physical benefits are there, but the primary focus is energetic. By controlling the breath, you learn to influence and direct prana, which prepares you for deeper meditation.
Okay, so postures, then breath control. What about chapters 3 and 4?
Chapter 3 takes us deeper into more subtle practices. Mudras and bandhas.
Mudras and bandhas, terms you hear a lot.
Yes, and this is actually the longest chapter, 130 verses.
Yeah.
It details 10 key practices involving these mudras and bandhas.
So what exactly are they in this context?
Well, mudras are often symbolic gestures, sometimes just with the hands, sometimes the whole body, used to seal or direct energy. Bandhas are more like energetic locks, specific muscular contractions used to control prana flow in certain areas.
Okay.
And the Pradipika, these are presented as techniques to further refine that prana manipulation we just talked about, and crucially, to awaken kundalini energy.
Ah, kundalini, the spiritual energy.
Exactly, that latent energy believed to sit at the base of the spine. Practices like Mahamudra or Mula Bandha, the root lock, are described. They often combine posture, breath retention, specific muscle actions, all to consciously guide energy towards, ultimately, enlightenment.
Sounds quite advanced. Yeah. And the final chapter, chapter 4.
The 4th chapter, 114 verses, focuses on something called Nadusanhana and leads towards samadhi.
Nadanusantana. What's that?
It translates roughly as investigating or meditating on the inner sound, the nada.
Inner sound.
Yes. The text describes subtle, internal sounds that yogis can apparently perceive in deep meditation, different kinds of sounds. The idea is to focus on these sounds as a meditative technique to reach samadhi.
Samadhi being?
Meditative absorption, enlightenment, that ultimate goal. This chapter outlines the sort of stages of consciousness you might pass through.
And is there a connection back to the earlier chapters?
Absolutely. It emphasizes that you need that sound, body, and mind cultivated through the asanas, pranayama, mudras, and bandhas from the first 3 chapters to even be able to perceive these subtle inner sounds clearly.
So the whole text really builds layer upon layer, a very systematic path.
It is, yes. Very methodical. And its influence, as we said, on everything that came after in Hatha Yoga is just, well, immense. It really set a template.
A blueprint for later texts, you mean?
Exactly. Texts like the Garanda Samhita and Shiva Samhita, which came later, definitely show its influence.
And its teachings are still felt today, even if people don't know the text itself.
Precisely. The core practices, the asanas, the pranayama, that are central to so much modern yoga. Their roots are deep in texts like the Pradipika. Even though they've been adapted, translated, reinterpreted over centuries, it's quite something how a 15th century text still shapes this global practice.
You mentioned scholarly debates earlier. What kind of things are still discussed?
Oh, there's ongoing discussion about things like, was Svatmarama the sole author of every verse? Are all the verses authentic to the original period? How exactly should certain technical terms be interpreted? These debates show it's still a living text in academic circles, too, not just for practitioners. It's complex.
And it's still taught in teacher trainings.
Very much so. It's often studied right alongside Patanjali's Yoga Sutras in many teacher training programs. That really underlines its foundational status in classical yoga education.
Yeah, that really drives home its significance. It's not just history. It's a living influence.
Exactly. And to really grasp its weight, it helps to look at the philosophy behind it. What were the core ideas driving Svatmarama's approach?
Right, let's touch on that. What's the philosophical heart of the Pradipika?
Well, the absolute core is the idea of integrating Ha and Tha.
Ha and Ta, solar and lunar.
Exactly. Ha represents the solar, active masculine energy, and Tha, the lunar, receptive feminine energy.
Right.
The whole point of Hatha Yoga, in this view, is to bring these two into balance within yourself, body and mind.
That's a powerful concept. Where does it come from?
It draws heavily from Tantric philosophy. Tantra emphasizes the interconnectedness of everything and, importantly, sees the body as a vehicle for transformation, not an obstacle.
Okay. And how does this solar-lunar idea play out in the practices?
It connects directly to manipulating prana, the life force, through the nadis, those energy channels, and the chakras, the energy centers. The ultimate goal, often, is the awakening of Kundalini, that dormant spiritual power. This focus on subtle energy on the body as an energetic map that's very characteristic of its tantric roots.
How does this compare to, say, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, another hugely important text?
That's a really important comparison. They both aim for liberation, or samadhi, ultimately. But their approaches are quite different.
Different.
Patanjali's sutras focus much more on the mind, on mental discipline, understanding consciousness, the philosophical structure. It's often called Raja Yoga, the royal path of the mind.
Yeah.
The Hatha Yoga Pradipika, though, gives you a much more practical, embodied path. It emphasizes physical purification, working with energy first, as a necessary preparation for those deeper meditative states Patanjali talks about.
So the Pradipika sees the body as essential to the process.
Absolutely essential. Not something to be ignored or transcended right away, but something to be worked with, purified, strengthened. It needs to be prepared. The sutras are more focused on the nature of mind and consciousness itself.
So the Pradipika offers a more kind of hands-on starting point.
You could say that, yes.
Yeah.
It's very grounded in physical and energetic practice. Its tantric roots are clear in this focus on balancing energies, the Aitai, lunar nadi, and Pingala, solar nadi, to eventually activate the central channel, the Sushumna, leading to higher consciousness.
It sounds like a very practical, step-by-step approach to spiritual development, starting with the body.
That's a good way to put it. Embodied transformation.
Okay, so we have the history, the content, the philosophy. But how does this ancient text actually connect to us now, in the modern world?
That's the really fascinating part, isn't it? Its relevance today is huge. The core practices, asanas and pranayama, are literally the backbone of most yoga classes globally.
Sure.
And they've been adapted, of course.
Yeah.
Made more accessible, more inclusive for different bodies, different needs. That adaptability itself shows the strength of the original principles.
What about those more intense practices you mentioned? The shat karmas, the cleanses?
Right. Some of those, like certain internal cleansings, are practiced much less often today, or in modified ways, mainly due to modern hygiene standards and health knowledge.
Okay.
But other aspects, especially pranayama, have gained massive interest from modern science. There's so much research now looking into breath work for stress, anxiety, mental clarity.
Right, you see studies about that all the time.
Exactly. And this research often validates the kinds of benefits that Pradipika was talking about centuries ago. It's this amazing intersection of ancient wisdom and modern validation.
Are there specific health conditions being studied?
Yes, definitely. Research is exploring Hatha Yoga's potential for things like managing diabetes, helping with asthma, improving mental health outcomes across various disorders. It provides actual evidence for benefits beyond just feeling good. There are even studies on energy expenditure. They show that Hatha Yoga, while generally low intensity.
Which makes it accessible for many people?
Precisely. It still provides meaningful physiological benefits. Great for people who can't do high-impact exercise. We now have solid evidence, for instance, that specific pranayama can reduce anxiety and depression symptoms. And asanas, well, we know they improve flexibility, balance, core strength.
So tangible physical benefits alongside the deeper stuff.
Absolutely. And let's not forget the spiritual side. The Pradipika continues to inspire people seeking that deeper connection, that inner peace through meditation and understanding their own energy. Even its simple advice, keep your practice space clean, live moderately, that resonates with modern ideas of holistic wellness, doesn't it?
It really does. It's amazing how principles from so long ago still feel so relevant and practical today.
It is quite remarkable. It shows that some fundamental ideas about health, balance, and inner awareness really do stand the test of time.
So as we wrap up this first deep dive, what's the main thing you think we should take away about the Hatha Yoga Pradipika?
I think the key takeaway is seeing it as this vital foundational text that acts as a bridge. It connects ancient yogic wisdom to modern practice.
Right.
It offers this timeless framework for physical and spiritual development.
A bridge. I like that.
And while, yes, some practices need careful thought in today's world, its core principles, the postures, the breathing, the focus on balance, they continue to shape and inspire the whole world of yoga. Understanding this text gives you such a richer appreciation for the tradition.
It definitely feels like we've only scratched the surface here. There's clearly so much more within this text and its influence.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
This has just been about laying the groundwork, establishing its significance. We can definitely dive deeper into specific chapters, specific practices, maybe compare it more closely with other texts in the future. This is just step one.
Well, it's certainly left me thinking. It's quite profound, really, how a text written centuries ago still impacts how millions of us think about and practice well-being today. What other insights might still be waiting for us in these ancient pages? Definitely food for thought. Thank you for guiding us through this initial exploration.
My pleasure. Until next time.
Until our next deep dive.